welcome back to the Voice of Dr. Yan. And in the last section, Colonel Emery has already introduced the current Taiwan, U.S., and Chinese relations, and also the response from his, based on his research from Taiwan, from U.S., and from China to this situation. So now we know, Colonel, that President Trump has made a good progress in making the U.S. and Russia's relationship back to normal. So do you think that in this is the reconciliation between U.S. and Russia beneficial or unfavorable for Taiwan?
As I mentioned in the first part, I believe from the point of view of military equipment, the ceasefire would be very good for Taiwan because the U.S. could reallocate weapons and training to the Taiwanese military. In strategically speaking, some people call what President Trump is doing is the reverse Nixon. If you recall, President Nixon tried to get Mao Zedong to become friendly to the West because he wanted to pull China away from Russia so that they wouldn't be a unified force. And so some people say that Trump is doing a reverse Nixon, which means he's now trying to pull Russia away from China to make sure that China doesn't get too powerful, because if China and Russia combine together, that would be a very difficult situation, not only for the United States, but for every other country in the world because of the power that they would represent. So I think it's good for Taiwan that the U.S. is trying to stop the fighting in Ukraine and trying to normalize relations with Russia. I think if you compare Russia to China, from a point of view of the threat, from the U.S. perspective, China is the greater threat. Although Russia has many more nuclear weapons, it doesn't have the economic power, it doesn't have the military power, it doesn't have the political power, etc. So if the United States is able to have a ceasefire completed with Ukraine and Russia, and then leading on to a peace talks and an agreement to stop the war, a peace treaty, that would be a big win. Now, obviously, if you're living in Europe, your biggest threat is Russia because China doesn't border you and it's not close to you. But I would argue that actually China is a threat to Europe because of its economic coercion that it does often against Europe whenever they do something that China doesn't like. So I would argue, although Russia is a military threat, direct military threat to the Europeans, China is the strategic threat to Europe because Europe is becoming more and more dependent on China. I think it's like 14% of the economy or the exports of Germany are tied in with China. And that's very dangerous because that means China has leverage over Germany. So yes, the stopping of the war between Russia and Ukraine is essential to Taiwan. Also, it will allow Taiwan to take some lessons from Ukraine and try to apply them here. And for example, the whole drone warfare that was done in Ukraine against Russian forces was devastating to the Russian forces. And I think also the PRC, the Communist Party of China, also learned from this war. And so both sides are going to be changing their military doctrine to adapt to this new type of warfare, including electronic warfare, drone warfare, a variety of different other kinds of warfare that became more prevalent in the war in Ukraine. So that's my summary.
Thank you, sir. By the way, I think that a lot of European politicians are kind of coward in this situation because they choose selectively forget how many people killed during COVID pandemic, and also that is a bioweapon released from the Chinese lab made by People's Liberation Army. And there are more people dead in the pandemic than they have been hurt during the Ukraine war. So that is more dangerous for them and more realistic, but they just say nothing. So yeah, I would say that I also think that the priority is to reduce CCP's power to control CCP to prevent it aligned with Russia to pose a larger threat against the U.S. and the Western countries. And let's move to the next question. The U.S. Department of State has appointed Annie Wu, the director of the political section at the American Institute in Taiwan, as charge aid affairs in Beijing. Does this mean that Taiwan's ambassadorial status is now considered higher than Beijing?
I think that would be a great thing to repeat over and over again and watch the Chinese government freak out. So that would be a good story. But I think what happened was she was simply promoted out of the position here, and she was transferred to China. A lot of the diplomats in the U.S. diplomats in Asia tend to go to different embassies around Asia. Beijing, Tokyo, Canberra, and move around. And then also they tend to try to move them in areas based on their language abilities. So someone here in Taiwan who understands Mandarin from a Taiwanese dialect and also can read traditional Chinese would be a lot easier to transition to a country like China, which has simplified Chinese and has Beijing dialect. That would be a much easier transition than going from Indonesia, which speaks Bahasa, to let's say India, which has many dialects or languages. So I really think that it was a promotion, and it also shows that the State Department views her role here as being a good job, and so she was promoted in that realm. Now, I would also say that the American Institute in Taiwan is what everyone acknowledges that it's the de facto embassy, although we can't call it an embassy because of our relationship based on the Taiwan Relations Act. And the mission of the AIT is defined in that legislation. So everything that an embassy does, pretty much the American Institute of Taiwan does, and so its function is very important to Taiwan, and it does a lot of coordination between all the ministries in Taiwan, and also allows American diplomats, government officials, military people to do their work here, and also allows Taiwanese to go to the United States and do both official and regular citizens to visit the United States and do whatever they need to do. And I might add that the ability for Taiwanese to visit the United States is very easy. They just go online and apply for a visa, and they get it within 24 hours. So the United States and Taiwan have a very good relationship, and I think that's a good sign. And it's also a good sign that whether it's the Democrats in charge or the Republicans in charge, Taiwan has been able to conduct its business with the United States and vice versa for many years.